Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, and tonight I have another book recommendation video where I'll be sharing my thoughts about some of my all-time favorite books that were written by women about women. I have here 5 different books that I'm going to be sharing my thoughts about these. And I'm gonna spend some time on each book sharing my thoughts and why specifically I recommend each of these books. I do think that each of these books are unique in its own way, and each of these books had made a huge impression on me and impacted me specifically. And as usual, if you have been on this channel for a while now, you do know that on my recommendations video, I do not spoil any of these. So if you haven't read any of these books, you are in a safe space. I'm not going to talk much about the plot, and I'm not going to reveal any major themes of the plot. So when I first thought about this video, I immediately thought that I should include and start with this book, which is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I think this is the most appropriate book to start this type of video because it is such an important piece of literature that gives such a good overview about women's role in literature across the history, and not only women writers but also women's character and how women were documented or recorded throughout the history on literature. This book essentially is set in 1929 in England. If you're not familiar with Virginia Woolf, she used to be an amazing thinker and writer at the time. And she was invited to perform a lecture in one of the most important universities in England about women and fiction. And this book is essentially an essay that she created for this. Now, when you think about an essay, you probably think, perhaps you're thinking about something that is very dry, academic, academia-oriented, full of research and a lot of information. This is not it at all, and I think this is also for me one of the reasons why I've put off this book for so many years, because I had it on my shelf but I never picked it up until recently. Because I felt really intimidated by it, and I felt that it might be a little bit heavy for me, or hard to understand, or hard to follow, but it's not. The way that she writes this essay, and it's only 114 pages, is really, really smart and clever. The way that it starts off very funny. She's sarcastic, she's funny, it's very light, and it puts you in a really, really good mood because she makes jokes and she takes that into very unexpected directions. But then she also writes this essay in a very novelistic style. So what she does, which is really smart in my opinion, she creates a fictionalized version of herself. And it's written in a way of a novel that feels very intimate and personal, almost like she's writing to you, to a close friend. And she's writing that in a way of like her going through the thought process of preparing for this kind of lecture. Now, before we continue with the things that she's learning or exploring throughout her preparation for the lecture, I think it's really important to provide some context to what did it mean to be a woman back at the time. We're talking about 19 1829, women were not allowed to study. They could take some lectures every now and then or take certain courses, but they were not allowed to achieve a full degree. So all of these universities are predominantly male dominant. The other thing is that women couldn't be financial independent, so they had to rely on a man, whether it's their father figure or husband. And in general, women were expected to marry, have kids, manage a house. All of this intellectual ambition was not something that was expected or accepted, or some people even consider that very threatening and unattractive, like an unattractive female quality. Women just didn't have any proper education or a room of one's own, and that's kind of one of the main points of this book, is that she's saying that in order to be able to write like Shakespeare, for example, a person has to have a room of one's own. And a room of one's own has a physical layer to it, which means that a person actually needs to have a physical room to be able to write and spend hours and hours in a day thinking and writing their things, their art. And also they need the financial independency of being able to spend so much time in writing. But on a non-physical way, in like a metaphorical layer, a rooms of one's own is also related to the fact that a person needs freedom and clarity in order to create art and in order to be able to write. And oppressed people are not free, so how can they have the same opportunity? For example, women back then were oppressed. They didn't have financial independence. They were heavily relying on men, and they didn't have the educational opportunities as men. And this is kind of why she thinks women were almost absent from literature until the 1900s. It's an incredible book. She talks a lot about themes of like anger versus clarity and freedom versus limitation. She mentions there are a lot of really amazing and important women writers from the 1900s, and she mentions that some of them used to write out of anger, and it influenced their writing a lot. And she wondered what would have happened if they had the same freedom as men had, and what have we missed as a society and humanity of losing the opportunity of having another Shakespeare, for the sake of the example. Highly recommend, and if you have read that, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Now moving forward, I think it's going to be a very natural shift. I'm going to move forward to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is definitely one of my favorite books. I have talked about this book in my channel previously. I love this book so much. And I read that twice. Once when I was a kid, like really, really young. And another time I read that a few years ago. And I would definitely aim to read it again, maybe next year or in 2 years, because it's such a gem of a book, such a good book, a classic, timeless masterpiece. If you're not familiar with Jane Eyre, let me do a brief introduction. It's a book written in 1847 in England by Charlotte Bronte. It's a book about a girl named Jane Eyre, and we're we're following her coming of age story through childhood all the way to adulthood. It's a pretty long book, I would say. I think it's like 500, almost 600 pages. And there's a lot going on here. Jane Eyre, she's an orphan, and she has a lot of really harsh life circumstances. She starts off her life with her aunt who is taking care of her. And her aunt is like a very mean and evil person who thinks that Jane Eyre is a very hard girl, very rebellious girl, very wild girl, undisciplined. And she eventually decides to send her to a girls only school. And then in the school we learn that Jane Eyre is a very, very smart, bright young girl, and we follow her story through adulthood. One thing that I really like about this book is Jane Eyre's character. I think that the character is so well written and so well rounded that it still lives in the back of my mind, and I oftentimes think about Jane Eyre. She's such a complex character, and a lot have been said about this and written about Jane Eyre. People said that they can analyze her characters for hours, but what I like the most is the fact that she has like this duality of at one side she's very smart, rigid, self-disciplined, has a very strong sense of morality. But then on the other hand, she's also very wild and rebellious, and she's outspoken, and no one will tell her what she needs to do or how she needs to think. And I appreciate that. She's a very independent woman, and she thinks for herself. And that's one of the things that made this book so revolutionary at the time. When Charlotte Bronte actually published this book, she published it under a man writer name, so she didn't use her own name. Back then it was very, very hard for women to publish novels. So the book did gain popularity and success at the beginning because it was under a man author name. I think the name was Cora Bell. And after it gained success and popularity, she did decide to reveal that it was her who written the book. And that was the revolutionary thing back then, of people realized that a woman wrote a book about a woman, which was very surprising and progressive back then. Some of the criticism that this book received was that it is too intense, that it is too focused on inner conflict, that Jane Eyre is too independent, too outspoken, too assertive, too aggressive. Today, a lot of people will say that this is definitely a timeless masterpiece and such an important, groundbreaking book, because of all of those reasons, because it talked about a character that was too outspoken and too assertive. So if you haven't read that, I highly recommend. I think it's a phenomenal book. Next book that we have on the list is one of my absolutely recent favorite reads. I think it's an incredible, incredible book, and it is Sula by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is such an incredible writer, and this book just completely surprised me with the level of depth and complexity and symbolism. So this story is set in 1973. It's an American novel about two women and a friendship between them. It's about Nell and Sula. It's sort of like a coming of age story, although I have to say it's not like a regular plot story. It's almost like Toni Morrison tells us a story about what had happened in the past. It's like she's recalling a memory. It's almost like you're sitting on the couch and someone tells you a story. So it's a very, very interesting way of writing, in my opinion. It's not that long of a book. I think it's like less than 200 pages. Nell and Sula are two black women, and they're very, very different from one another. It's like almost two opposites of type of woman. So Nell, she's very disciplined. She follows society rules. She's very kind, responsible. She has kind of almost, you would say, a high sense of morality, and she's like the good girl. She wants to get married and have kids. And Sula is a little bit different. Sula is a very wild girl, wild woman. She doesn't follow any social norms or social rules. She's very independent. She lives her life on her own terms. And we're following their story, not in a very chronological way, as I mentioned. It's almost like recalling of a memory. And I want to specifically focus on Sula's character. The book also focuses on Sula's character. But what makes this book so, so special is the complexity and symbolism that Toni Morrison is creating with the incredible character of Sula. So Sula doesn't follow social rules. Sula doesn't center her life around family or around men. And she also doesn't feel very guilty for this. Now, when I read the book, a lot of the times Sula did things that I was like, why is she doing that, Sula? And why is Toni Morrison writing this way? It's almost like something that I cannot understand or even think that it's like that something like this even can happen. I think Toni Morrison does that really, really smartly because she never judges Sula. She never romanticizes Sula, but she also really refuses to minimize Sula to a very simple, flat character. And she never answers any questions whether Sula is bad, like the society tries to label her, or whether the society is actually bad because the society judges her so quickly and kind of sees her as this outsider. I was really, really interested and intrigued by this symbolism that Toni Morrison is doing. I think it's an incredible book. I wrote down here, people define themselves by what they are not, which is Sula. And we can see that actually in real life, how oftentimes people can dehumanize women because of their actions or misjudge them or even hurry on judging them and making conclusions. So this book is considered groundbreaking for many reasons. One of the reasons is because, first of all, it is centered around two black women, which is something that back at the times we haven't seen much. And second of all, Sula is a very unconventional character, and Toni Morrison refuses to quickly judge her or to label her, to put either a good or a bad label. And it leaves a lot of room for complexity and to think. It's a very thought-provoking book. and I highly enjoyed that. And I know Toni Morrison has a lot of famous books. I don't think people are talking about this book much, and I think people should talk about this book more. Okay, next we have A Letter to a Child Never Born by Oriana Fallaci. This is a very special book for me personally. It has impacted me a lot as a woman, and it's a book about a woman who discovers that she's pregnant. She's not, I think she just broke up from her ex, and she's not in like a serious relationship. She has a career, and she was really surprised by this. And she then decides to start a letter to the unborn child. And it's a short book. It's like 100 pages. And the book is her speaking to her unborn child and sharing her thoughts. Now, I don't think this book aims to give us clear answers. It's just a way to explore the complexity of the situation and the complexity of a person before such an enormous decision of bringing a child to this world. And I think it's such a raw and real book of a woman just asking herself questions about life and the world that we live in. A lot of the times in the book, she just wonders whether she wants even to bring a child to this world, and the horrible things that had happened to her that makes her be hesitant about that. This isn't a traditional novel with like a plot that you can follow. It's just like her writing this letter, and you kind of get a glimpse to her mind and through her thought process about the situation. And it's just a book about life, and I felt that a lot of those things really resonated with me and questions that I have even before thinking about having children. It's just like universal things that I feel like a lot of people are thinking about, especially when they about to make a big decision like whether they want to be parents or not. Just things that people think about. It's written so real and beautiful, and it really moved me. I see that LA Times wrote a review here, like one sentence, saying, "The articulated questions truly belong to all of us, men and women alike." I know that the name can be very threatening, but it is honestly just a beautiful glimpse to a person's mind in a very raw and real way. And this book received mixed critics just because of the fact that it was written in the 70s, and people had a lot of criticism because they thought this book is too intense. But I think it's really great. One thing to know about this book is the fact that I learned that they're actually not printing that anymore. They stopped printing that years ago, so it's kind of quite hard to get a copy of this. So if you want to purchase that and give it a try, I would recommend searching that in secondhand vintage bookshop. Okay. Now moving to the last book of my list. This is a book of another Italian writer. You probably heard about her. Her name is Elena Ferrante. She's very famous for her sequel of My Brilliant Friend. but she has a lot of amazing books. I read a bunch of her books, including My Brilliant Friend, and I really, really like the author. But this one is my favorite of hers. I honestly think this is such an incredible masterpiece, and I think that with years this will become a classic. It explores a story of a woman that basically her husband decides to leave her for a younger woman that he was having an affair with for the past years. So it almost sounds like a very well-known cliche story, but it takes such a unique turn, and it's not like anything that I have read in my life. Elena Ferrante, I don't know if you knew that, but this is not her real name, and we actually don't know who she is because she's anonymous. We know that she's Italian, but we don't really know anything about her other than this. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think the fact that she writes anonymously provides her the ability to be so real with her writing, that this is like such a power that she has. I really wonder if she made that decision deliberately to be able to write more freely without the expectation of society, or maybe she's just like a private person that wants to keep herself private. I think not a lot of women can write this way because the social norms aren't allowing it. And this is a book about a woman's rage and a woman's anger about what happens when you dedicate your life to your husband and to your kids and to your house. What happens when you decide to not fulfill your career and to do everything for the sake of everybody but yourself? And of course that this is not the story all the time, right? There are a lot of women that enjoy spending time at the house and taking care of the kids, and then they have incredible, fulfilling life. It's not about that. It's not about saying that there is only one way. But it's a story that's worth telling, and it's a story that I'm happy that she's telling in a way that is allowing us to accept females' rage and anger. It's not a plot-based story also, so it's not like a lot of things are happening. I think it happens throughout like a few weeks. What is interesting here is the writing about the way that this woman is angry and is doing unthinkable things. It's hard at times to read because she's like spiraling in this deep, dark place of like deep depression and mental struggles and almost losing touch with reality and walking a very thin line between sanity and insanity, because her life are literally collapsing and everything that she was so attached to is falling apart. She doesn't know who she is anymore. And there are pages of pages here of her cursing and like so angry and does like terrible things. I was like literally shocked. It may be really harsh to read to some people, but I think it's also important. And that's why I think this book in 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to be so important. One of my subscribers wrote me that she bought this book because of my recommendation, and that she really enjoyed that. I devoured the book. I literally couldn't stop reading that. I was so glued and moved and empowered also. I highly recommend that. If you have read this book, let me know in the comments. And that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for joining, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. And again, if you have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments below. I would be more than happy to hear your thoughts. And I hope you have a good night.